And we are back again with the Empire of the Cop Insider podcast with covering Liverpool's Neil Jones, here to discuss that West Ham draw 2-2 with Bowen, Robertson and Areola own goal and Antonio on the score sheet. I mean, Neil, we talked last time about this Liverpool side being asked to go repeatedly back to the well, and they've delivered so often throughout the season. But, you know, we had the 1-0 home defeat to Palace, and then it appeared we turned a corner with successive wins against Atalanta, against Fulham. But then we've got a defeat to Everton and a draw with West Ham, and Liverpool's season is officially petering out. So, I mean, was there a sense of disappointment watching that, or was it just mainly understanding, having already diagnosed the issue?
A little bit of both. A little bit of both. I didn't expect Liverpool to be sort of fantastic at West Ham. It's an early kick-off. It's not a stadium that lends itself to sort of rip-roaring atmospheres at the best of times, but certainly not in the 12:30 slot against a team that, you know, is quite functional as opposed to being, you know, sort of wide open and sort of gung-ho. So I didn't expect it to be a game that really sort of got us all hooked back into falling in love. But I think there would still be a lot of frustration because it was certainly a game that Liverpool should have won, and we're in a position to win, of course, with what, 12, 13 minutes to go. But it felt like a little bit of a microcosm of Liverpool in recent weeks, didn't it? You know, cheap goals conceded from crosses, chances coming and going. You know, I saw there was a stat about, I think Gakpo alone had 8 shots in the game, didn't put one on target. And yeah, scruffy goals with a fortune, but no real sense that Liverpool were clinical or Liverpool were going to, you know, really sort of answer the questions that have cropped up in recent weeks about both ends of the pitch, but in particular the attacking side. And when you don't take your chances, when you don't convert, yeah, it leaves you open to what the other issue Liverpool have had, which is that they don't seem to be able to keep them out at the other end.
We'll come into some important and positive sort of context around this, but I want to touch on a couple of strange incidents in the game, or at least incidents we're not used to seeing, perhaps. There's obviously the main one, which is the Salah and Klopp heated exchange, just as he's about to come on. I think probably maybe a lot more has been made of this than should be, but then Mo probably doesn't also help himself after the game, telling one reporter, "There's going to be a fire today if I speak." I mean, what have you sort of made it out of all this? Because, I mean, we know the type of player Mo is. He wants to be playing absolutely every game, and you'd imagine that's what his sort of qualm has sort of originated from, just as he's about to be sort of put onto the pitch. Is that what it sort of comes down to? Is it just sort of end of season frustration with how effectively Liverpool season has petered out?
Yeah, possibly just a 7-year frustration, if you like, or just, you know, the culmination of a 7-year relationship that, you know, is ending soon, and maybe there's just that element of having enough of each other, or being able to say what they maybe haven't said in the past about, you know, certain frustrations that they might have had with people. Now, listen, until you know exactly what Klopp's gripe was, I mean, the immediate assumption I made was that he felt he should have been on or ready to come on sooner, or, you know, he took too long. But I don't think that was the case, because Salah was the first to the touchline. Obviously, Joe Gomez and Nunes were there at the same time. He didn't say anything to them. So yeah, maybe there was an element of Salah saying, you know, are you going to leave it this late, or, you know, why am I not starting, or whatever it is. But yeah, I don't think that happens personally if Jurgen's not leaving. It certainly doesn't happen, I think, if the game or the title race is still in the balance, or Liverpool still feel they can win the title, or, you know, they've got plenty to play for. I suppose you could say they don't think Salah would be on the bench if that was the case. But it's this. I just felt a little bit sad watching it, you know, especially those two. And I would hope that both make some kind of effort to, you know, to present a united front for the remaining games. It would be a real shame if the final weeks of Jurgen Klopp's time at Liverpool, and potentially Mo Salah's time at Liverpool, but, you know, certainly Jurgen's, were to be marked by, you know, tensions between those two. Because really, if you were drawing up the sort of the chart of people who've had an influence over Liverpool in the last 7-8 years, I think they would be the top two. I think Jurgen Klopp would be number one, and Mo Salah would be number two. Or, I mean, there'll be people who'd argue vice versa, but they would be the two really that have done so much to make Liverpool what they've been in the last few years. And yeah, if you were to see them fallen out. It's not quite to the level of, you know, Alex Ferguson, Roy Keane, or those kind of people, but it's not what you want to remember them for, is it? You want to remember that, yeah, Klopp and Salah, what a glorious sort of relationship that was. Both got the best out of each other. Both did each other untold favours and positive things. So I hope the final 3 games, I hope Salah starts next week for the start, and I hope he scores a couple of goals, and I hope there's sort of, even if it's a little bit forced, I just hope there's kind of a bit of effort made on both people's parts to sort of present a united front and to remember the good times as opposed to maybe the little frustrations that are bubbling over at the moment.
And that's the thing as well. We've got to remember, you know, Salah's legendary sort of status at the club as well has been pretty much confirmed as well. So it's for his sake as well, just as much as their relationship. There is also the other sort of bizarre incident with Anthony Taylor blowing up Gakpo, pouncing on the sort of loose ball that Areola sort of thrown in front of him. I mean, I read up the explanation after, you know, the rationales followed the corner. You know, I think Areola appears to pick up an injury. Taylor allows him to play advantage. Gakpo pounces, thinking the whistle hasn't been blown, and then Taylor belatedly blows the whistle to ensure that the advantage to Areola is preserved. That sounds like a mouthful, having to explain that all at once, when it feels like it should have just been a lot more of a simpler situation. I mean, how did you react to coming out of that?
I mean, look, I think Gakpo should have probably put the ball in the net and give everyone an even bigger conversation to have. I think Taylor fudged it, didn't he? He clearly didn't do. He didn't make clear enough what his intentions were in the game, and you know, you can argue what his intentions were, but I think had he just said, "Look, it's a free kick," that's that. You know, you don't need to play an advantage if the keeper's got the ball in his hands. Really, you know, you just say, "Yeah, put the ball down and kick it." It was a strange situation. We've had a couple of those, haven't we, recently? With there was the one, it was Arsenal, wasn't it? With was it Bayern Munich, where the goal kick was taken and Gabriel handled it and played it back, thinking it hadn't been taken or acting like it hadn't. I think these ones are a little bit. Look, I can see people's frustrations, and I think the frustration is probably with Gakpo is like the old Bill Shankly statement, I think, isn't it? Put the ball in the net, we'll have a conversation about it afterwards. But you know, it's a silly one if you score. It's a silly one if you concede it. It doesn't feel like the sort of goal that you want to be seeing every week in football, even if it is a bit dozy or naive from Areola. But yeah, another example of referees maybe not being clear enough in their communication and their application of the rules, and that's been a consistent theme throughout the season, hasn't it? And I think the way that Taylor beckoned on the physio after he ran down to Areola, who'd obviously, you know, had the fright of his life, if you like. I think the way that Taylor done that suggested that he knew that he'd made the balls of it.
No, I think that's fair to say. I mean, let's move on to sort of more positive sort of context here. Liverpool did officially secure a return to Champions League football, which was, you know, the objective at the start of the season. I think realistically, I mean, we've spoken about this multiple times, that, you know, none of us would have expected the title challenge right at the start of the season, following what we all experienced the season prior. And you would have probably bitten someone's hand off to take top four and a cup. Perhaps a bigger cup we might have expected or hoped for. But this is the reality. And I think it's important to bear that in mind, as much as it all hurts to see the title challenge peter out in this manner. That, you know, going into the season, this is what we would have probably accepted from the off.
Yeah, I think it's important, especially with the manager changing as well, that you're leaving a club that's in the Champions League. Has obviously got that revenue, got that pull for players in the summer. You think if 12 months ago, if Klopp had made this decision and left and Liverpool were fifth, it would feel a bit different, wouldn't it, going into the season with a midfield that isn't fit for purpose in terms of its, you know, its age profile and it's what it's got in its legs. And being in the Europa League would have been another problem on top of that, wouldn't it? So yeah, of course it helps going forward. I think Jurgen made a point on Friday, didn't he, at his press conference? He said, you know, it helps the new manager that there is space for improvement, because, you know, you go in after you've won let's say they only won the Premier League. It's a tough job to follow that, isn't it? You know, you can sort of you can pretty much write off being able to better that in your first season. So I think it does help. Obviously, it is an accomplishment, especially really because it's easy. It's now easy to forget because they've had such poor seasons. But there was a lot of concern about what Chelsea were doing last summer. There was a lot of concern about about United had won a cup last year, got to another final. They'll be better this season. Well, no, they weren't. Tottenham obviously had a new manager. I think he's done okay, but we didn't know how that was going to play out. Newcastle were seen as this coming force, weren't they? That they were right up there and they were going to get better. They haven't this season anyway. So there was a lot of uncertainty around Liverpool and the other top four contenders at the start of this season, and Liverpool have been the ones who've exceeded expectations. Really, they've been the ones who've punched above their weight slightly. I wouldn't say loads because I still think this is a very good team and I'd obviously one of the best managers in the league. So I don't want to give them too much sort of credit for where they got to, but they're the ones who've done their job, haven't they? And like I say, they're not. It would take a hell of a swing, wouldn't it? They're not mathematically secure yet, are they? But Tottenham would have to win about 12-0, I think, in the remaining game.
Yeah, it's gold. Yeah,
absolutely. Gold. Yeah. So, but they're there now, and I mean that does take some weight off because there's a couple of games there: Villa away and Tottenham at home. Obviously, if you were still in trouble, say Tottenham were 3-4 points closer than they are. That would put a bit of pressure on those games, and that would ask Liverpool some questions that they'd probably rather not be answering at this stage of the season in the form that they're in. So yeah, it is good, but just for the next manager more so than anything, it's we should never take Champions League football for granted at Liverpool. There was many years I've watched Liverpool without it. Obviously, this season they were without it, and we felt it. I think, especially when. I felt it, especially when them quarter-final draws were made, and I looked at those ties, and I thought all of them were really good ties. And I thought, oh, God, imagine Liverpool were in amongst one of those, City v Real Madrid, Arsenal v Bayern Munich, PSG, Dortmund, PSG Barcelona, sorry, and you're thinking that they're big ties then, but I fancy Liverpool to have a good go at any of them over two legs. So definitely don't take Champions League football for granted, and I think it'll be a big boost for Arne Slot going forward.
No, absolutely, and I think as well if you look at sort of the quality of the fixtures in that quarter-final, I think Liverpool approach it perhaps differently, maybe with a different sort of spirit in the dressing room. Certainly, when you're facing Atalanta. I mean, one thing you have mentioned there is obviously that Klopp himself did make that point in his pre-West Ham presser that the results do leave Arne Slot with perhaps his move being less daunting. Although there does seem like there are more things to fix. Now, certainly for Edwards and Hughes, looking at this, how the sort of season's ending. I mean, they've got to be thinking, even ahead of Slot coming in, how much can the manager do here to rejuvenate sort of certain players? Is what I'm trying to sort of get at. And we could potentially, couldn't we, sort of see a bigger exodus of players than we might have perhaps initially thought about at the start of the season?
I don't know. I mean, I think it's dangerous to do that based on 3 weeks or 4 weeks. Sorry. You look at all of these players at various points this season. We've had shows like this where we've spoke about how good they are, and we spoke about Alexander-Arnold being, just remarkable quality. Virgil van Dijk back to his very best. Kanate after the new year, what a performance. Gerald Kwanzaa, brilliant stepping up. Wataru Endo, what a bargain he was. Alexis McAllister, Dominic Szoboszlai at the start of the season. Curtis Jones, the growth of him and the development of him. Harvey Elliott, what a player. Darwin Nunez, Luis Diaz, Cody. All of these players have had a lot of praise. So I think there's more. There's more positive than negative from this season in a lot of those players. I think the last few weeks have been overwhelmingly negative in a few issues, and I think one of the ones really is sort of there's a couple of players I think that you're having similar conversations about too long into their career, but I still don't think that will lead to Liverpool cutting 4 or 5 surprise sales or sort of doing 4 or 5 surprise sales. I think maybe what we're discovering is the issue with when you have a squad full of potential is you have a squad that's also full of potential disappointment, isn't it? And there's a lot of players there that are not yet at the top level, they're very, very good players and they're potentially top level players, but they're not yet there. And you know, Liverpool, we had to go through this a little bit with the previous team. There was times when, listen, let's not kid ourselves and pretend that Roberto Firmino was elite level for the entirety of his Liverpool career. It took him probably 2 seasons to get there. Sadio Mane had a really good first season, but he kicked on from there. You know, you look at Gini Wijnaldum, probably wasn't at the top level. He became that kind of player. Jordan Henderson took many years to become that sort of player that you could depend on. So I think you have to give some of these players the chance to get to that level. Obviously, it'll be a big change with a new manager coming in and a new system and things like that. But there is a lot of potential within this squad. There's a lot of younger players that, you know, with an extra season and a season. Look at Arsenal, for example. You know, they did something not dissimilar to what Liverpool have done this season. You know, they got to a position in March where they were really, really, you know, in the position where everyone thought, oh, can they go and win it? And they couldn't. And they came up short, and people criticised them, and people asked questions of them. People say, well, actually, do you know what? They haven't got the mentality, or they haven't got this. Liverpool aren't too dissimilar in that situation to Arsenal. So I think you do have to give the bulk of these players the chance to take that next step. I think there are some. And obviously, there's a couple of older players who will leave. I think Matip will leave. I think Thiago will leave. You know, there's obviously questions around Salah. I don't think we need to worry about Van Dijk personally. I don't think we need to worry about Alexander Arnold, even though, you know, he's younger than those two. I think the bulk of this squad should be kept together. I think the question is just where the sort of little tweaks and improvements come. And obviously what you do with those big contracts that you're going to be dishing out. But I think Liverpool have a very good side, potentially to become a brilliant side. I think they probably would be. I think now you'd be looking at maybe two players that would come in with just a bit of different attributes in terms of maybe a little bit more pace, obviously maybe just a little bit more clinical in its finishing, maybe a, you know, a more reliable sort of centre back would be one that I would be looking at. But I don't think Liverpool should affect their transfer policy or their summer plans based on the last few weeks. I think they should look at that as you know, a lesson learned and a bit of potential that you know can be rectified going forward.
No, I think that's pretty fair. I think certainly one thing that I suppose in my mind it was more about sort of a question of maybe some of the more older sort of experienced heads, if that makes sense. Because I think, I mean, you see certain reports around, say, Ryan Gravenberch, for instance, and I kind of think, well, he's been here for a year.
Yeah, that's it. Yeah. I agree with the sentiment that, look, you know, if you were, let's say 50 million was on the table for every Liverpool player. Say there was a 50 million bid for every single Liverpool player in the squad. Ryan Gravenberch would be one that you go 50 million, probably. Yeah, you know, like let's take that, because I'm not sure. I think we can get a better player than Ryan Gravenberch for 50 million or whatever. But there isn't going to be 50 million on the table for Gravenberch. So what are you going to get for him? Probably what you paid, probably less. Like why would you give up on the potential? Why wouldn't you try and get the very best out of him? And, you know, I thought he was pretty good actually on Saturday, Gravenberch. I thought he had a good game. I thought he was decent, obviously, at Fulham. He's a frustrating player because he doesn't always put it all together over the course of a half or a match. But there's certainly a footballer there. You know, I think the same about Szoboszlai. I think, you know, look, I don't think you'd get what you paid for Szoboszlai now if you tried to sell him. I think Liverpool probably did overpay for potential last summer, but you could still get Szoboszlai can become a 60 million player for you, 100%. Darwin Núñez, you wouldn't get anywhere near what you paid, I don't think, for him, but you could still make him into that player that you need. So I think I understand why people want to cut these players loose and say, look, I've had enough of watching them, and the recency bias. But let's not forget, you know, this is only March the 10th. They were absolutely battered in Manchester City for 45, 50, 60 minutes. You know, the best team in the league. They were absolutely running all over them. And you wouldn't have said at any point then that any of these players would be, you know, not good enough to play for Liverpool or should be moved on. You'd have backed into the hilt. So I think it's important to remember that, look, sometimes you can just lose your way, have a bad month, have a bad couple of months, run out of steam, run out of legs, whatever it is. But it doesn't mean that they're done and dusted for you know, the remainder. I think there's more Liverpool players here that'll kick on next season than there is that are in decline.
No, absolutely. I mean, you look at even sort of Nunez and you think, I had a look at the sort of goal contributions per 90 prior to the West Ham game. He's still, I think, exactly 90-ish. So you think, well, this isn't a player that you're thinking is, you look at it and think, oh, he's not scored for 5 games, but he's still, over the course of a season is contributing. But that's a separate point for another day. I mean, confirmation of Arne Slot certainly serves to highlight the one thing Liverpool didn't do, which was go for Ruben Amorim. Interestingly, of course, he went as far as apologising for his meeting in London with West Ham, and it's obviously since emerged in reports that it's been hypothesised that the purpose of the trip was to put pressure on Liverpool. But I mean, it's ultimately backfired, hasn't it? Because Liverpool have always had their eye on Arne Slot and increasingly became more enamoured with the prospect of the Dutchman.
Yeah, I think you have to trust Liverpool's decision-making process here. And one thing you can be sure of is this isn't a kind of a knee-jerk decision from Liverpool. They won't have just gone, no, like, we're going to just go for this guy. There will be a detailed, obviously, process that's gone on, led by the data team, and obviously with huge input from the obvious figures, Michael Edwards and Richard Hughes and the likes. I think we've said many times on these shows, haven't we, that it was always going to be a risk. And you're always going to look at it and say, well, that could work, that might not work. You'll have to prove that, or you'll have to answer that question. That's definitely the case with Arne Slot. You come from the Eredivisie. There's a great example just up the road, isn't there, of just how difficult it can be. I read Martin Samuel's column in the Times on the weekend, and he made a good point in the sense of every coach sort of comes with the same kind of not CV, but mission statement, if you like, that I play this kind of way and I want my centre-backs to do this and my midfield does this and I'm committed to the press and I love Guardiola's football and this and that. The bottom line is, until you get punched in the face, you don't know how you're going to react to you. So coming in, he's got questions to answer. We'll see how quickly he can get his message across, how quickly he can sort of adjust to the rigors of the Premier League and the different challenges. Listen, it's not like it was maybe 20 years ago, but it is a very different proposition. And you hear a lot of people who come from different countries, they can't believe the way games are refereed in terms of the contact that's allowed. They maybe can't believe the intensity. They can't believe when they go to away grounds and they think, wow, where are this team in the league? And the 16th, and they say, wow, why are the fans so up for the game? So there are a lot of things that he will have to learn or get used to quickly. But he's had success. He's had success with a team that was probably less expected to have success than others in the league. He's punched above his weight in that regard. He's done it by improving players that were already at the club and by bringing in players that he's turned into better players. So there are elements to it. He's got to a European final as well, albeit the Conference League and albeit that he didn't win. So there are some good ticks in the box, I think, from him. I don't know him as a character. I've read, obviously, a lot of people who've dealt with him and say that he is a pretty good character. He's a good communicator. I think I saw that people said, his English is far better than someone like Ten Hag, for example, who does seem to have struggled a little bit with that element. And that did surprise me, I think, when Ten Hag came, just how poor his English or his communication was. I don't think that'll be the issue with Slot, judging by what I've seen. So there are some, again, potential. I'm talking about the squad here, but it's the same with the manager. There's potential there, which obviously does mean there is potential disappointment or potential failure as well. But he's the guy that Liverpool have chosen, and I think you have to trust the people who've chosen him because, listen, they've got a lot of decisions right. The last manager they picked, they got very, very right. Most of the players they've picked over the last few years, they've got very, very right. So, yeah, let's see if they can get this one right.
No, it's interesting as well. I think that the comparisons have been made to Amorim Sporting in the sense that Feyenoord have turned a two-team league into a three-team league. I mean, one thing I'd love to get your viewpoint on, because Melissa Reddy did a brilliant segment on the race for Slot and Amorim, and she talked about a major sticking point being the playing philosophy. Of course, you can appreciate why that's an issue. Amorim plays 3 at the back, whereas Slot's Feyenoord is stylistically similar to Klopp's sort of Liverpool. Yet Liverpool were also, at one time, seriously interested in Xabi Alonso, who also played with a back 3. I mean, other than sort of Xabi's sort of past relationship with Liverpool, the fact he's managing in a superior league with the greatest respect, I mean, what would you say sort of distinguishes the two? And do you think Liverpool would have run into a similar issue and sort of eventually maybe gone for a Slot anyway, because of that sort of stylistic difference.
Yeah, I mean, listen, there's no. You don't know that Slot won't want to play with a back three, but I suppose Amorim's been doing it for 4 or 5 years. Alonso's done it for 1, and has changed that up through the season. I'm not sure Alonso's wedded to a back three in terms of the way he plays. I think you look at Liverpool's squad. It lends itself. I mean, what does it lend itself to? It lends itself to I think it lends itself to a 4-3-3 or a 4-2-3-1, and that's a lot of that dependent on probably where Trent plays in there. I think it would feel like a massive shift if you were bringing in a brand new manager and you were going for an entirely new sort of way of playing. It would be potentially exciting, obviously, and interesting. And if the manager backs himself, then good on him. But it would also feel like, wow, there would be a lot of sort of teething problems potentially coming down the line. There'd be a lot of questions asked early on. But yeah, look, I can't speak for that being a key factor in why Liverpool didn't do it. I think there'll be other factors considered. And I think maybe the fact that he ended up in London, allegedly putting pressure on Liverpool, might be one of the factors that they didn't that went against them. You know, that sort of, I wouldn't say questions about his character, but sort of, I don't think that kind of thing goes down well when a manager's or clubs are caught on a manager. But Slot, clearly, I mean, his sort of system that he's played at Feyenoord, and again, he's played there for what, 3.5 years? Is it 3.5 years? Yeah, 3.5 years. That he's played has been quite consistent in that, and obviously Amorim's has been the same, albeit a different one. So maybe there's just a little bit more evidence of that being their way than there is with Alonso, who's just about to finish his first full year in management.
No, absolutely. I mean, what's your
and sorry, and Alonso didn't play a 3 at the back, I don't believe, at Sociedad's B team, for example. He wasn't that. This isn't a kind of. This has been a very successful system for him, and of course, I'm sure he'll persist with it for as long as it is successful. But it's not something that sort of has defined his managerial career so far, I wouldn't say.
Yeah, I suppose that's fair enough. You can argue he's only just sort of started trying this out, so he could be sort of amenable to a change had he been open to taking the Liverpool job. But we've got Arne Slot, and we're certainly, I'm very curious about. And what's your feeling around how the arrangement will work? Because obviously you think the structure we've got in place with Edwards and Hughes, it feels like it's going to tilt back towards sort of the coach doing the coaching, and that sort of thing.
Yeah.
I mean, we're going obviously with a coach whose philosophy and style of play, a lot. You mentioned, of course, the human touch there fits with what we're currently doing at Liverpool. I mean, is this an appointment that certainly excites you? And what do you already like about sort of Slot? I know that's quite a hard one to put by you, but there's been footage obviously going around about like sort of the Ajax Amsterdam chat, and he's sort of talking about the bigger picture with his players. I mean, are these the sort of things that really sort of hit a note with you?
Yeah, I think it's difficult. I think the potential of him and the squad, and I think that a young manager. I mean, okay, he's 45, he's older than me, but he's relatively new into management, isn't he? I think he's 5-6 years into his managerial career. A hungry manager that sort of has got the opportunity to take on the next step with a squad that is in a pretty similar position as well. So I think that is probably the combination that you're putting together there is probably the most exciting part from my perspective. The unknown is a little bit of an exciting part, and I know I might be saying something different in a couple of months' time, but sometimes just knowing that if Liverpool at the point of Unai Emery, I think that would have been a very good appointment, but you sort of know what you're going to get, and there would have been an element of sort of, I think a lot of people would have been like, okay, like you can sort of strap yourself in for what you're going to get. This is something that there's a lot that we don't really understand, or we don't know about this guy. We don't know about, like I say, how he transfers over, but that gives you potential, like I say, and that gives you the room for pleasant surprises. It gives you the room for things that you haven't even thought about. You might suddenly see, you might see, I don't know, 4 or 5 players that you didn't really see as being top players just emerge and just absolutely love working under this manager. You might suddenly see Harvey Elliott just be the one who, wow, he starts every game. What a player. Like, he plays as a number 10. He does this. He goes in behind. You might see Stefan Bajcetic, a forgotten man, obviously, coming in and just being like, wow, this guy, like, look how good this manager's made this player. So I think the unknown is an element to it. You're right about the structure. I think it is going to be more of a head coach figure. But in amongst that, and it is important to say this, that might be the way the club sort of delineate things and say, look, he's our head coach and Richard Hughes and his team are in charge of our recruitment and our contracts. Arne Slot's job is to coach, to manage, to decide the formations, decide the team, to feed into what we want to do. From the fans' perspective, he's the Liverpool manager. Let's not get that arse about face. He's the Liverpool manager, and when he speaks, he's got to speak like a Liverpool manager, and he has to have that authority. He has to have that sort of ability to strike the right chord. The last guy who did it has been unbelievable at it, hasn't he? And I know there's people who are sort of starting to have that kind of weirdness because the last weeks are coming. And yeah, of course, his words carry a little bit less weight at this moment in time. But that's been one of the best things Jurgen Klopp has ever done at Liverpool, is get the right tone, say the right things, strike the right message when it was needed. The next manager's got to do that, whether he's the manager or the head coach. He's got to communicate well with the supporters, got to get the right messages out there, and that'll be a challenge for him. But as I say, it looks like he doesn't mind talking. It looks like he's got a decent character behind him, and hopefully we see that shine on Merseyside.
I'll tell you what, he hasn't half got his work cut out for him. That first press conference to improve on doubters to believers.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. What was it Jurgen said? He said that it doesn't matter what people think when you come in, it matters what they think when you go out. And I hope people remember that one as well in the next few weeks.
It's an example for Arne Slot to remember sort of coming in. He's got his work cut out for him, but he'd certainly rather be coming in to a Liverpool side that is Champions League qualification, even if it has fallen just short of a Premier League title. Liverpool third in the table with 3 fixtures to go. Time, Neil, has almost certainly run out for this podcast. It's almost certainly run out for Liverpool's title hopes, but not at least to hand the manager a positive farewell at the head of his summer exit, which is absolutely the least he deserves for all he's given Liverpool, the city of Liverpool, and of course the fan base. Neil, it's been an absolute pleasure doing this again with you, as we do it every 2 weeks with the Empire of the Kop Insider podcast. You can of course catch all of Neil's work on covering Liverpool with his Substack at neilj.substack.com and on Twitter or X, or however you call it, at Neil Jones Goal. And of course, we'll be publishing all this lovely stuff on our own YouTube and Substack at empireofthekop.substack.com. Until next time, it's been the lovely Neil Jones. I've been your host, Farrell Keeling. Take care.